Life is something about living, and I've always felt that way. The things I live by is one, don't care what anyone else thinks about you, and then two is life is short. Our business was suffering in the beginning. Trying to convince someone to lie on the bed, let us put a medical laser and shoot laser beams at your face to clean your skin was a very hard proposition to do.
Can you take us back to the early days of SuperOrdinary and what the intention of the business was at that point?
Back in 2018, I was in Hong Kong. There was this app called WeChat, and it was like this super app where you could do all these different things. And I was just amazed with how these creators at the time were distributing content and distributing product. After about 3 months, I said, you know what, there's something to do here. So we scaled the workforce up close to 350 employees within the first 2 years.
In the US, how do you work with most brands today here?
A year ago, we had about 250,000 affiliates. We have about 2.7 million now, a year later.
I'm Sammi Cohen, and this is Social Currency, a podcast that unpacks the stories that are shaping business, culture, and the intersection of the two. Before we start, quick reminder to subscribe to the show if you haven't already. Subscribing helps us keep bringing you the people shaping where business and culture are going next. And today's guest is operating right at the center of this shift. Julian Reis is a personal friend of mine. He also happens to be a wildly talented entrepreneur whose career spans finance, hedge funds, beauty tech, e-commerce, creator monetization, and now the explosive rise of TikTok Shop through his company, SuperOrdinary. In this episode, Julian shares how he jumped from finance into founding Skin Laundry, what scaling beauty in China taught him about consumer behavior in the US, and why social commerce is rewriting the rules of retail. He has many bold predictions about where the space is going and how the social commerce landscape will impact the way that millions of Americans shop online. We also talk about micro dramas as the next frontier of brand storytelling and how to know if your business is right for TikTok Shop. I am so excited for you to hear this episode. So this is Julian Reis' Social Currency. Julian Reis, welcome to Social Currency.
Sammi, so good to be here. Always great to see you.
For the audience, so Julian and I are friends. We first connected on your podcast,
That's right.
On the Record.
That's right.
On your fabulous green couch. And what I'm so excited to talk to you about is the fact that throughout your career, seemingly you've lived 10 different lives.
I feel that every day.
Which is incredible.
Yep.
And you have such a unique perspective. And so for this conversation, there's so much to cover. Right before we started filming, I literally said I could talk to you for 4 hours at a time. I promise that we'll keep this more succinct than that. But for this conversation, I want to talk about your previous endeavors, but then really talk about what you're doing now, because I am so excited about that.
The one thing I really enjoyed about our conversation last time was we really talked about things that were a little bit uncomfortable where the world is going. But also I think, everyone's on their own individual journey, as we all are. My career, my life started in the finance world, the macro events and where the world is going. I love to think about where my views are different, where they're non-consensus. That played really well when I was a trader. So I started my career at JPMorgan. I was a trader there, launched a hedge fund shortly thereafter, which was an incredible experience. I was back in Asia when I first did that, then moved to London and opened a hedge fund there. And then after 2008, during the financial crisis, I wanted to do something completely different. I felt that at that time in my life, I had 3 young children, 3 boys, had moved back to Singapore. I wanted to do something completely different. And I took some time to explore that experience. And the first thing I did was an e-commerce business, which was really distributing beauty brands within Southeast Asia. I was an early investor in this business called Luxola, which eventually got sold to LVMH and became Sephora's business in Southeast Asia. That was the first experience that really took me out of the finance world into e-commerce. There onwards, it's been a myriad of different businesses, but eventually now I started SuperOrdinary.
Just take us back to your upbringing a little bit so people get a little bit more context as to how you've turned into this person.
I'm an identical twin. My brother Justin also lives in LA now. It's the first time in 25 years we've lived in the same country. We were born in Australia. We moved to Singapore when we were 5 years old. My dad was a cook and was working in the restaurant industry with Pizza Hut. So it brought us to all these like exotic countries within Asia. He opened the first Pizza Hut in Asia. We spent most of our life following our family around. It kind of gave us this incredible comfortability about living in different cultures, living in different countries. The chaos was, natural to us. We felt comfortable in change. We went to these international schools that, gave us these weird accents. Being a twin was a very special thing to have because it gave us the confidence to rely on one another. And when it was time to leave home and go elsewhere, we applied to universities in the US and UK. And I had never been to England prior to that. And we ended up, both of us, going to the UK to separate universities. It was the first time we ever were separated as twins. And being an identical twin is a very special thing. And then post that, Justin moved to Australia and I moved to New York.
You spoke to going to university in the UK. Did you know at that point that you were going to go into the finance world, or how did you end up there? Because your background, you said your dad was a cook.
Yeah.
How did you even decide that was going to be the path?
It's funny, when I think about why I was interested in going that route. I remember as a kid, I watched a lot of movies and, we were always, we didn't have TikTok or we didn't have YouTube. So everything was either videos or DVDs at the time. One of our favorite movies as growing up was watching Wall Street, Gordon Gekko. It was one of those things that I watched over and over again. I could remember a lot of the lyrics of the show. And when I was at university, I actually studied a lot about trading prior to leaving university. So I knew that I wanted to try it out. It was something that was very interesting to me, that you could go into a job which you would have a different set of challenges every day, different ideas. And there was always that instant gratification. I guess it was today's Kalshi and Poly markets. And it was nice to be able to be your own boss. Essentially, even if you're working at a bank, you're actually running your own business within the bank.
From finance, what was your first entrepreneurial venture at that point?
I think setting up a hedge fund was definitely a big, scary thing to do, because at such a young age to say that I'm going out to back myself, and there's, you live and die by the decisions you make, and there's nothing more true than putting real money on the line and thinking about the second you press that button, it can go up or down. And this is setting up the company is one thing, but once you start trading, you have to perform. And the worst thing you can do is, lose money consistently and then not be able to continue the business. So that was definitely, I would say, the real first entrepreneurial thing that I did. I love the idea of being able to be and back yourself. This is really dovetails into the world of creators today, is that creators back themselves. Look at you, you're building this incredible business. And I think that's something so commendable. 30 years ago, when you're coming into the workforce, we were always told to become a lawyer or work in a bank or a doctor. And these were jobs that were ingrained into our society, that this was the only way to build a career. And I always loved, encouraging young people to go out and try things. I've got 3 boys. So one's in London, one's in Tokyo, one's still here at school. And I just love the fact that they've gone to these different countries. One even dropped out of university to pursue his career as a musician. And I think that's something so special. For me, it was something that I've always wanted to do, was start my own business. And ever since that day, I've never worked really for anyone else. Where
do you think that entrepreneurial drive comes from? Because starting a hedge fund, doing what you do today, that takes a lot of chutzpah, as my people call it. Where does that come from?
If I really dig deep into myself, I think, life is something about living. And I've always felt that way, that it's very important for the time you're on this earth to really go out and live. Some of the things I live by is, one, don't care what anyone else thinks about you. That's one. And 2 is life is short. And sometimes when you frame any decision using those 2, boundaries, it makes you do things that you probably wouldn't normally do. Start a podcast, start a business, go to a different country or travel there. So I think when you think about things in that context, it really gives you the confidence. And also the thing that I always said to myself was, the worst thing that could happen to me was that I'd have to go and get a job back at a bank. And that's not such a bad outcome, really. And I also believe that I also love meeting people. I think it's really one of the things I truly enjoy is the relationships that you build, because that's something that AI will never take away. And I always tell my kids that. I said, really, really treasure the relationships you build, because in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, you could go back to that person, or they could come to you when they really need your help. And, that will be the good karma and the change that you want.
I completely agree with that. And I think I was talking to someone about this the other day, where there's so much of our lives that are being created through artificial intelligence, and we're in front of screens of all different sizes all day, every day. Yeah. But on the other side of the spectrum, you have this even deeper need to become more analog and connect with humans versus computers. I see that need of relationships and building human connection even stronger today than it has been at any other time in history.
Absolutely. I think the value of real friendships, real people, being in the office with other people, it's going to become very important to anything we do. It's like you need to make sure that you have that ability to separate the two universes. Very recently forced to do that, and everyone has to pick a side. Mm-hmm. So I think that's something that getting more comfortable with. And I think sometimes when you take a step back and see what's going on in the world today, and you can really start thinking through like, okay, this is real, this is not real, and make sure that you're focusing on those relationships that are real. You
spoke about the hedge fund that you started. Yeah. So you take a pretty drastic career step after that. Yeah. So walk me through how you go from finance to the beauty world.
There was this concept that beauty performs well in down markets. And I was like, as a hedge fund trader, well, that's a hedge, right? If the market goes up, beauty stocks go up, and then the down markets, beauty stocks don't go down as much. So I was like, that could be interesting. And, with the rising tide of GDP growth in Southeast Asia, I thought this was an interesting category to be involved in. High margin, small products, cheap to, transfer. So that was something that I was interested about, and it also played well to my strength, which was meeting new founders who are creating new brands. So I really enjoyed it. It just ticked a lot of the boxes that I was interested in at the time.
You see that there's this opportunity. Yeah. How did you go from recognizing the opportunity to opening that very first location of Skin Laundry?
Yeah, so Skin Laundry was a very interesting experience. I didn't even know you had to be a medical doctor to operate a Skin Laundry at the time. And I literally found this place on Montana in Santa Monica. It was a time when the whole James Pearce Californication type was in vogue. And I was, coming from Asia, like the first time you come to LA back then, it was just like, where am I? This place is about surfers, beautiful people, everyone's happy. And then this is coming from like a lemming society in Asia where we're all following each other to this place where you really encourages creativity. When we designed Skin Laundry, I really wanted to give that idea of this Californication surf lifestyle that, I copied a lot of the James Pearce design aesthetic. And because the idea was really to build Skin Laundry into a global franchise, a global business. The concept was really to, create something that, took from another industry, but applied to the medical spa industry and make it non-doctor dependent. And I was talking to Ali Webb about this. She was charging $45 for a blowout. And I was trying to charge $50 for a medical laser procedure with a doctor. Very quickly after, I was like, I'm making a big mistake here. I should have priced it much, much higher, because this, price infers quality too. Because we were using a laser, which another doctor would charge $2,000 for the same treatment. When we started to increase pricing, which we eventually did, the business became very profitable. I think what I did with Skin Laundry was we went after a very big problem, which was giving one laser facial, the best facial we possibly could, as a technical medical facial at the best possible price to everyone. So that was the thesis. And today it's still on its journey. It's growing all around the world, in the Middle East, London, Hong Kong, US, and opening other markets. So that was a really great experience for me to build something which was nothing in my wheelhouse. And then when I was in Hong Kong, that's when I went on to the next page, which was SuperOrdinary.
I know you already mentioned one of the oopsies. Reminds us that we're all human and we all make mistakes. And you can see the company where it is today and how many locations you have, but you don't hear about the stumbles in the beginning.
Like there's so many oopsies, like every single day there's one. And I think, as a CEO, as a leader, you start to get immune to a lot of the pain, because I think handling this tremendous amounts of stress, And, my wife, Ali, always says to me, she's like, and my brother's like, you can handle enormous amounts of stress. And I think sometimes it's just because as you get older, you get more, the skin gets a little thicker. That, it's never as bad as you think. That's the one thing I would always say to everyone. It's never as bad. The noise is as the pain you are in that very moment. Just make sure that this soon will pass, which it always does. And I always think about, like, in 100 years, is someone going to care about that? And the answer is 9,000% no, right? So I think the oopsies, it can be everything. And a lot of it is sometimes down to communication. If you're not very, very clear with your team and with your staff and what to expect, that's when things fall apart. We went into laser hair removal. Not many people know this story. Well, we did laser hair removal. There's one person out there that knows that our business was suffering in the beginning. We, trying to convince someone to lie on the bed, let us put a medical laser and shoot laser beams at your face to clean your skin was a very hard proposition to do, especially when it was called skin laundry. Some people thought it was a white supremacy movement. Some people, and I can't even begin. It was so much. One day, we decided we're going to laser hair removal, and I had no clue like what that would entail. I studied what laser hair removal was, I think, almost a week before, and we put this program together, and little did we know we weren't doing it properly. And myself was inside the room trying to figure this out, and we ended up taking it off the menu immediately because we're just the ambition to try different things all the time, and you write it up to a learning experience. Even at SuperOrdinary, we've launched products that didn't work. As negative as they are when it doesn't work, the most important thing is to just really, as everyone says, learn from them and move on. But I try not to dwell on it, because I remember one of my employees once told me, he said, oh, you did this and it didn't work. That's an oopsie. And I was like, so what? Like, I really don't get what the point is of bringing that back up again. I think we, as long as we're learning from this experience, that's the main thing.
Yeah. If you're never striking out, that means that you're not swinging high enough.
Exactly. Yeah.
Where does the company lie today? Because I understand you may not be involved on the day-to-day operations, but where is the company today?
So Skin Laundry. So Skin Laundry, I still remain on the board with other board members. The business continues to grow. It's profitable and, looking to scale. The business is getting much more into its own, in the sense that people know the brand. It's very well recognized. It's in multiple countries. We have extremely loyal customers who will continually come back. And I think it's something that you can't buy on the internet. And it's a technical medical facial that you see immediate results from. It's something that won't go away. I really think that the business is at this point that eventually it will probably sell to a private equity. But right now it's continued to grow. And, the markets that it's growing in are Middle East, London, more in the US as well.
Because of your background, having worked in the Asia market and just your expertise in, I'd say, global business, do you think that that's why you've been able to expand as quickly to these other markets? Because I imagine if you're a US born and raised person, going to a market like Asia would be a lot more scary, intimidating, challenging.
Yeah, I mean, I had dinner last night with a friend of mine who used to run Disney in Asia. And she was telling me that when the time was to come to go and move over to put up your hand, she was like the only one to do it. I would jump at the chance of, if I worked for any company and they told me you can go into this new geography, I think it's something that we should all explore and do. I personally have not spent much time in the Middle East. I've only recently been going there every quarter. I was kind of angry with myself because it's such an interesting culture over there. The people there are, remind me of Asia back in the day, where they wanted to discover and try everything. They've certainly got the money to do it. And there's no debt in the business, in the country. It makes me a lot more comfortable. We're opening our offices over in Dubai and in Latin America this year. And I've never been outside Mexico City, and I'm excited to go to these cities and see what's going on there. I love traveling. Traveling is definitely the number one thing. If I have to spend money on, is luxury, is travel, especially in today's world. I think that's something that we can all enjoy.
Definitely. And I agree with you.
And I know you are too. You were in Bali when we were there last year.
Yes. Now that we've covered the Skin Laundry chapter, So let's get into SuperOrdinary.
Yep.
And I think what you were just talking about actually around this willingness and ability to really think more globally about how you scale your business obviously dovetails really well into how you initially approached SuperOrdinary.
Yep.
So can you take us back to the early days of SuperOrdinary and what the intention of the business was at that point?
Back in 2018, I was in Hong Kong. This was the time when Alibaba, which covers Tmall and Taobao, which is like the equivalent of Amazon in China, were selling products. And Taobao was doing a live streaming feature called Taobao Live. And at the time, I was going up to China, just curious. I had some friends who were working there for like Nike and some of these other big American businesses. One thing I just quickly noticed was that there was this app called WeChat, where people were communicating, and it was like this super app where you could do all these different things. You could create a mini app within WeChat, and people were transacting, they were selling products, they were transferring money, they were using it to record videos, and they were also doing these live streams on Taobao, which was a traditional e-commerce app for all intents and purposes. And I was just amazed with how these creators at the time were distributing content and distributing product. In the West, we had Instagram, which was very much about seeing your friends' photographs, photo sharing. But this was different. This was distribution, and distribution in terms of monetization. I thought very long and hard about it. And I said, well, if I really want to get into this side of the universe and this business, I have to move to Shanghai. So packed up my bags, moved to Shanghai, and didn't know anyone in Shanghai to work with. So what I did was I hit up some of these recruiters like Robertson Stevens and Korn Ferry and told them that I'm setting up a company and I need to hire a CTO. So that's how I started.
Wow.
And in the lobby of the hotel, I started just meeting people, met people from PayPal, Microsoft, L'Oreal, and just really started figuring out what was going on. And the funny thing is people were very willing to share their experiences. They realized I didn't have any experience. After about 3 months, I said, you know what, there's something to do here. Let's start bringing Western brands, operate them on these super apps, learn how to sell product. TikTok just started in Shanghai at the time with Douyin. Let's learn this business. So that's how it started. And the first brand we started with was a brand called Pharmacy.
I have so many follow-up questions, but I think just the framework that you laid out of just understanding that there were these super apps and people actually transacting and interacting and purchasing items all through there. I think when we look at these major shifts in the way that transactions and money flows, right? It's usually because there is this huge pattern disrupt. And obviously this one was tech enabled and that these super apps that existed in Asia were taking off. But from there, what did the first few years look like when you were scaling in Asia?
I think what you just said is very important, was that the platforms were there first, and that without these platforms, a lot of this couldn't exist. And that it's an important point, because that will bring us to why the US has been very slow in adopting live streaming and TikTok's commerce. Or social commerce. So when we first started, it was very much about bringing Western product to China. And we did that through Hong Kong, through the cross-border e-commerce channels. And we had to build these brands from scratch. No one knew what Pharmacy was. No one knew what Drunk Elephant was, Olaplex, Supergoop. These were all our brands. We had the rights to these brands in China. So there's no Google, there's no Instagram, as you know. So we'd have to create these brands, localize them, treat them as if they were our little babies and make them grow in these markets. Very much a highly involved, and it wasn't one brand, we were managing 30 brands. So there was a lot of work. So we scaled the workforce up close to 350 employees within the first 2 years. To go from 0 to 350, you have to build, and also I didn't speak Mandarin, and to build a whole team around that was a daunting task. And I have to say that it was really enjoyable, because working with local partners and local employees, and to keep them excited, you learn about motivation, what motivates different people for different things. Is it job security? Is it pay? Is it the vision of the company? And it's all of the above. We did that, and most of these brands we took to, and we grew them in such a massive way that they were exited. So Drunk Elephant went to Shiseido, Pharmacy sold to Procter & Gamble, The Ordinary went to Estee Lauder, Olaplex went public. these are brands that, we feel we help contribute to their outcome, because the China story was such a big story at the time. Back in those days, everyone was like, if you get China right, you're going to have a great outcome. So we were seen as that partner there. But during all this time, we were learning about this little app called Douyin. And most people don't realize, the consensus view in the US was TikTok was this Chinese spyware app. Over there, TikTok went from 0 to today, where it's about 700 billion in revenue just in the domestic market. A lot of people don't realize about ByteDance is probably going to be twice as big as Meta this year from one app. And they're going to, so look at their EBITDA, their net income, and they do one thing. It's not Instagram, it's not WhatsApp, it's not Facebook, it's not all these other, things coupled together. It's one thing. My belief when I think about the US is that TikTok was just being grandfathered in and just launched with their new local partners and shareholders. In my view, it could get to $300-400 billion in revenue in the next 5 years. This is a tidal surge that when it happens quick. And it is a non-consensus view, I admit that, but I do believe that Latin America, Middle East, all these markets are driven by entertainment and short video content, and I really do believe that TikTok potentially will get to $1 trillion in the next couple of years in China, have huge ramifications for the rest of the market. So the way that I have been building SuperOrdinary is, how do we become the best partners to creators and brands? And how do we really take advantage of everything that we've learned in China and apply it to these other markets, which are about to increase the adoption curve?
Wow. Okay. So many points I want to double click into. First, you said this so casually, but I just want to reiterate something. You did not speak the native language. You moved to a new continent, albeit you had lived in Asia.
Yeah.
You then have to recruit all of these people from the ground. It's not like you had this pre-existing team that was there. You have to train them. You have to not only have the vision for what you're going to do, but you are literally building it from the ground up. So I think when people are wondering, okay, well, why, if this is so successful, why haven't more people gone into this space? And it's because, Julian, what you've done is so incredibly hard. You had to have the vision, you had to have the execution, you had to understand the timing too, and you saw it before it had really come to the US. So I just want my listeners to know how insane this is.
First of all, thank you for the compliment. It does remind me of going through immigration in Shanghai Pudong Airport, hundreds of times, reminding myself, why am I doing this? Because I'm leaving the children and I'm going to do this crazy thing. And it goes back to I really love the chase. And, I do feel like being gifted with this little bit of foresight that I see trends happening before they happen. And I love to really see that through. So I think the trend I saw in China, which I do see now in the US as well, is that this TikTok phenomenon and the creator economy is really going to unfold in a massive way. And I think it's currently non-consensus, because I think a lot of people still are in their own brand world and they just want to make sure that their brand. But I think there's a much bigger, and I think you've alluded to this on some of your other podcasts, that there is a seismic change going into the creator economy. It's not just creators are building, businesses and distribution points, but something's happening. The movement away from physical real estate, physical to, the Saks story, which I love watching you cover, to what is the new real estate story and who owns that real estate, and that's to frame it. I think that's a great analogy for what a creator is the new shopping mall.
When you say high level, you helped these brands expand and obviously have these incredible exits like Drunk Elephant and others. Can you share some of the key aspects of what SuperOrdinary was able to provide to these brands? Because high level, it sounds like, they just expanded to millions of dollars in revenue. But what does that look like? What levers were you pulling in Asia that you think would be really interesting for my audience to know?
I certainly don't take all the credit for this. And I think our team is amazing. And I think when we partner with a brand, we think of it as our own brand, as if it's a joint venture. And we have joint ventures with these brands, some of these brands now, because we feel like we're creating a lot of the value for these brands. So typically what happens is when we work with a brand, we really take a deep dive to, what's the reason for the brand to exist? Do we need another, lipstick brand in this shade, or do we need another moisturizer with this ingredient? And I think what we do is a really hard study to prove to ourselves first, and then to the brand, that we can really grow this. We typically build a deep deck of usually 75 to 100 pages of a go-to-market plan and what it would look like in the rollout. And we're doing online, offline. We're building the brand from scratch. And I think what the Asian markets taught us was that you have to really invest in the brand back in the beginning. And there was a lot of risk involved to build these brands. I think what we did was extremely hard work. Often, I think we weren't paid enough from that risk because, essentially we're building someone else's brand. And then at the end, if we sell it, they leave us. So I think that was really gave me the knowledge that, okay, it's great to do this model, but there has to be a better way to create more value for SuperOrdinary. But I think that's where we, eventually get into our later phase. But we were doing this for these brands, and sometimes you do a great job and the brand's happy, and sometimes the brand doesn't accept it into the Asian market. So we're also very aware that when things don't go right, why aren't they going right? Is it an ingredient issue? Is it something that happened in the US market about the brand founder? Like there's so many of these things. So, and we're always at the end of the stick because we're just waiting for things to happen. Working with a brand, and then some brands can skyrocket. So we work with some of these large creators who are selling tens of millions of dollars in a day. There's been countless nights where I'd phoned the manufacturing facility in New Jersey, and we said we need 150,000 units, and I need it here tomorrow. So it's all of that type of stuff that gave us a lot of learnings to think through what could happen in the West, which I think is extremely exciting about what's coming.
And before we talk about the West, can you explain the main difference between China's KOLs versus US influencers?
First of all, everyone's a KOL. You go, just walk down the street.
And also KOL, can you break that down?
Yeah, key opinion leader. You have a key opinion leader. You have a KOC, a key opinion consumer as well. There's acronyms for everything, as you know. The industry there was very prolific in the sense there were so many KOLs in the market, and the KOLs were seen as celebrities. They would be brought to restaurants, to events, and this was, I think, the first country that really used them as, working in the fashion industry. You'll see them at the front row of all the fashion shows. And these KOLs were broken down into macro, medium, and micro. And the super macro ones were the guys doing billions of dollars of revenue per year. They had a whole infrastructure, whole teams around them. It's very much operated like a big Fortune 500 organization. And there's probably about 5 of those KOLs. And the way that you'd work with a typical KOL, you'd have to pay them an upfront fee for placement in their live streaming show. They would get a commission from this number of sales. Usually it's 20%, and you'd have to guarantee them stock so that they could sell through that stock during the show. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense. And you'd have to compete for that time. So it was really retail programming in its first instance. So if you go to Century City and you see a promotional stand or a pop-up there, it's that type of activation, but on steroids.
Wow. Okay. You've said something along the lines of the US e-commerce / consumption market is around 4 years behind Asia. So I think that's a good segue. So what do you mean by that?
The reason I moved to the US was because COVID occurred, and I was locked in a hotel. So obviously I had to make moves with the family, the kids. And I think one thing that when I landed in the US, I knew a lot of people in the beauty industry at the time. And the question I always got from a lot of people was like, oh my gosh, just do live streaming, set up, a live streaming app in the US and start selling product. I thought about it a lot. And to the point that, why isn't there a social commerce platform? Why isn't there a way that influencers can use their audiences on these different platforms? I got to the feeling that it wasn't the right time because we didn't have the platform TikTok to operate TikTok shops. Until we have that platform, so many apps, as came and went. There's so many live streaming apps, and these live streaming apps, with the exception of Whatnot, which I know the founders and they're amazing, that was the only one that really did it. The other apps weren't available. So Amazon tried it. We've seen it with Instagram tried it, and they've all shut off live streaming e-commerce. I mean, Amazon still does it, but Instagram completely went out of the e-commerce business. There was a 4-year lag, and I really coined it as this 4-year forecast because I really truly believe that once we had the platform, the adoption curve was about to start playing out. So in 2000, 2 years ago or 18 months ago, when TikTok Shop really started, that's when the clock starts for me. I think TikTok did close to 17 billion in revenue last year. And I truly believe that over the next 5 years, that as long as status quo and the algorithms stay the same, I think, we'll be over 300 billion in revenue.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's my hot take.
Yeah, that is nuts. Now your focus is primarily, well, you're still doing Asia, of course, but in the US, how do you work with most brands today here?
We partner with brands. Typically, the way we work with a brand is it's a 1 or 2 year contract. Geography is driven by platform. We are an extension of the brand in the sense that we operate the brand on TikTok. That's our main focus. So, everyone from Disney to H&M to a lot of the large beauty brands, we work with, Kenvue now and Church & Dwight. A year ago, we had about 250,000 affiliates that worked with us on TikTok. We have about 2.7 million now, a year later. And the reason we work with all these brands is we're collecting data all the time on who is the best person to sell for our products, not who has the most followers, who can pick up the glass and talk about it, constantly learning and watching this data. And it's become such a powerful tool for us because we can, pull on these levers. We can give product to those who really we think can sell, and we can do a better job for our partners. We take a commission, and that commission is based on GMV. I believe that, SuperOrdinary, with the exposure to all these global key account brands, as we continue to grow, we learn more. We all benefit from the organic tide shift and new transactions that are happening on the platform.
Someone is behind a brand, whether they work at a brand or they're the founder of a brand and listens to everything that you're talking about now. What are some of the key metrics or even data points that you look at before you agree to work with a brand?
There's a lot that's recently changing within the platform. So for those who don't know, that TikTok was originally we could connect to your e-commerce platform with its Magento or Shopify, and we would send you orders and then you would fulfill the orders. March this year or in April, it's moving to FBT, like FBA, fulfilled by TikTok. And this is a pretty significant move by TikTok because what they're saying is that we want your inventory sitting in our warehouse. We want to be able to operate it. We want to know where it is. We want to know how much you have. Because if we know that, we're going to be able to really help the brands be more vertically integrated for the customer's experience. And, the Amazon Prime, as we all know, is a very valuable asset that Amazon has. So think about the 170 million people on TikTok. If they start paying or using Amazon Prime or TikTok Prime, there's something happening here that we have to be aware of. And I think for brands, I think there's not a question of when you have to be on TikTok. Brands of all shapes and sizes. The one thing about TikTok, it gives everyone an equal chance to be successful. On Amazon, you're paying a lot for advertising. Your placement fees are very high, they're north of 25%. With TikTok, it's obviously, you're working with creators who are the distribution point for your brands, who are going to endorse your brand and do the marketing for you. And you only pay for marketing once the product's sold. You obviously can boost your content, and that's something that, at SuperOrdinary we do. We've built a clipping business. Many people don't know what clipping is, but we have 4,000 clippers now around the world where we would take a clipping of Sammi Cohen, give it to them. They'll put it into the metaverse, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat, ubiquitous content of yourself within days. And we do that because we can offer very, very low CPMs. So cost per thousand, less than $1 sometimes. Whereas before, you're advertising on these other platforms that cost you 15, 20, 35, 40 CPMs. So, that's a really exciting part of what's happening. So a brand that wants to work with us, we typically look for brands mostly in the beauty and wellness category. I think that's our strength. We also do now fashion and other categories. But I think it's a brand has to take TikTok very seriously because that's where the discovery of your brand is happening for your consumer. And then, the repeat purchases can happen in any of the other channels.
Have you seen anything that stands out to you around the brands that really crush it on TikTok Shop? Obviously, there are, as you said, so many different sizes of companies, but anything you see specifically?
I think the one thing, and this is really important, is that to win in TikTok, you have to look at the margin profile of your individual product. At SuperOrdinary, we're about to launch some brands with creators, which we are partnering with. The thing that we always go back to the drawing board is, can this product live on TikTok and be profitable? You pay about a 20% commission to the creator, and that creator will go out and talk about your product. The way that we believe is that you have to be able to pay more, because even though it hurts your bottom line, the goal is to grow your market share and grow awareness, so that when you enter these other channels, retail or Amazon, the brands are known well enough so you can succeed on those channels. The brands that really do well are the ones that can pay high commissions.
And you've also said, speaking of growing brands, that it takes around 5 years, I believe, to grow a brand. Why do you think that?
If we're going to jump off the ledge together and build something, the brand, if it's got any real true brand value and you're going to sell the brand for something in the future, it just takes a long time for people to really get comfortable with it. I know there are brands that just skyrocket from day one and insane, and it's great to watch, but I'm talking about on average. I think you really need to, these legacy brands, particularly in fashion. I mean, if these so many brands come and go, and now with AI, everyone can create a brand in half a second. So I think more than ever now, it's like if a brand is to succeed, it's going to have to take much longer time. I think it's also harder for brands to exist. I think brands come and go so quickly today, and the second that you see a brand start to head negative year on year, it's almost, the investors are almost like, it's game over. It's survival mode.
Yeah, it's a good reminder for everyone who's watching the Rode deal, the Rode Elf acquisition. That was done in 4 years, I believe, from start to acquisition. And that was because of Hailey Bieber. That's not because of anything else. I mean, she is the marketing engine for it.
Absolutely.
But for everyone who's not building a brand with Hailey Bieber, unfortunately, it's going to take a little bit longer.
You have to marry Justin Bieber first.
You did mention that you yourself, or SuperOrdinary rather, is building these brands.
Yep.
And so do you see that brand building as really a core lever for SuperOrdinary moving forward?
Yeah, I think the direction I'm taking the business is to really build new IP and new channels within TikTok for our brands. For the last 5 years, people and some of my investors have questioned, like, why have I got so heavily into the creator economy? Why not just stick to TikTok? Why not just stick to Amazon? I really do believe that building these relationships with these large creators, these affiliates, is going to serve us and give us a really strong moat around SuperOrdinary, to the point I think that these creators, these affiliates, should be our shareholders. Because why not invest in yourself if we're paying you and we're giving you all these brands? It's something that I've been thinking a lot about, and I spent a lot of time thinking that the real value and what's happening with creators now is something has changed in the last 3 to 4 months with some of these new initiatives that are coming out, where creators are really understanding that what's the true value of the infrastructure, their distribution. Just imagine if you have a store on Madison Avenue and only 3 people come in your store every day, whereas you're a creator and you have 50,000 people seeing your store every day on one of these platforms. The like for like is not measured properly. I think SuperOrdinary becomes the natural partner to these creators, all shapes and sizes of all different categories, and really helping them monetize. Marketing is about monetization today, and we talked about this before. And how do we monetize? Is it through selling product? Is it selling content? And how do we structure those relationships? So this is all in real time right now, and we're very excited about building these enterprises with creators. And I think the long term is owning these audiences, using AI to help us to really connect with the audience in a better way. And sometimes it's building an AI twin. That's coming. Like, these are things that I think are really exciting. I've kind of taken our time to do it because you want to see where the dust bowl settles, but things are changing quickly there.
On the AI twin part, because I know this is a hot topic across everyone who consumes content and creates content, is your belief that because AI twins are coming, I completely agree with you. We saw the Kabi Lame deal that included AI twins in the press release. But do you think that when you're creating a twin, there's still inherent value in the human creator essentially building that trust first and then creating the twin? Because I imagine there are going to be a lot of companies who create these random people who look like humans, but they don't have that built-in trust yet. So where do you think that trust equation fits in?
I do believe that if it's a real AI twin of someone who, like yourself, there has to be that relationship. Otherwise, you're never going to give away your likeness to anyone. And that's your IP. It's something you have to retain on. So I think there's going to be these relationships where there's going to be a hybrid approach where, you'll be going live for 6 hours, and then maybe in Asia, you're going to be going live in Japanese or Korean or Indian for 5 hours. But guess what? You're going to have, millions and millions of more people listening to your content and commenting and learning about, this interview. And that's what's really special. And I think, the first part is, how do we build that relationship? How do we build out that trust? And there has to be symbiotic in the sense you both have to win from these relationships. And I think that's coming. When I start seeing all these AI images of other people live streaming, I just have no relationship with that person because I don't know the personality, I don't know who they are. All I say is, you got to buy this product. So I think there has to be some narrative and some storyline. It has to make sense to the consumer. Otherwise, they're just going to swipe to the next one.
I think that will give a lot of people some relief, knowing that humans aren't going fully by the wayside. You still need to have that inherent trust and relationship. 2 other areas of your business that we haven't talked about, and we can talk about them briefly, but I think it's really important to also speak to the scope of what you're building. You acquired Fanfix, which is a whole other company that obviously fits in very well to the creator economy. And you also have recently started creating micro dramas, which I am fascinated by. I did a little mini podcast on it months ago, and I just think this is the future, whether you like it or not.
Absolutely.
It's here to stay. So can you talk about both of those? I know they're very different.
Yeah. So Fanfix and microdramas actually sit within the same business unit. Fanfix will eventually be launching microdramas so that consume content there. The way that I think about Fanfix, when I acquired the boys who had started it, it's less than a year old. It was very small revenue. I was looking at that model myself because I really believe that the creator economy, if you can't own the creator, how do you make money from it? It was to take 20% of every transaction, which is what Fanfix does. We put the infrastructure behind the business and have grown the business to over $100 million a year now in that business, and very proud of the team that's, driven it. And what we learned from that experience was that the super fans are so loyal to these creators that this relationship, they would almost do anything to follow these creators. So we were building these B2B tools for these creators to essentially, it was like a payment processor. So they can, sell content, they can do videos, and I was like, well, what else can we sell through this channel? Because clearly we built something really valuable. This concept, which I was seeing in China, again, the 4-year playbook, these microdramas, this business was over $10 billion a year, which is twice what the theatrical business is in the US. And it was these short video episodic dramas, which were typically like these romantic, salacious shows, divided into, 40 to 75 units. It plays very well to the consumer who's watching something on their phone. He's flicking through and watching a minute. What really interested me in this was, one, that this was a great way to advertise products. We tested one in August last year where we did it with Alan Chicken Chow, who's a large YouTube creator. And we produced, I think, 15 episodes with him with a Korean skincare brand called Laneige. And Laneige was inside every episode, and it was and we worked in partnership. We built this together, and today it's done over 300 million views. This was definitely outside our usual remit of selling products, but it brought us into the media business. And I think the media business, as we know, it's content to commerce. And, working with these creators and offering them this capability that they can star in a microdrama provides another sticky moat around us to help them and help brands. You think about SuperOrdinary as social commerce, where you sell products and we sell content. That gives us a very strong reason to be in this business, to really accelerate other people's brands and our own brands as well, which is more IP to the company.
I know you're partnered with a lot of these big legacy media companies. You had mentioned Paramount, Disney, but what I see you doing, and they're probably not going to like this, is I see SuperOrdinary disintermediating, because creators are the new celebrities, right? And those old school celebrities who were on the cable television, the traditional forms of entertainment that people would consume, it's now being modernized in this way where the creator, the distribution is their little screen, their phone primarily. The people on the other side first are able to get way more distribution because, as you said, you can get 50,000 people in a second, right? To tune in.
That's right.
And you're now creating the media side. I don't see a world in which SuperOrdinary isn't one of these behemoths someday.
And this goes back to these relationships that we're building is let's be the best partner to these creators. Let's spin them up into their own media platforms. Let's get them to create products. It's very authentic to them. And let's make sure that we can be that, it has to be equitable too. Gone are the days where like, hey, I'll give you 10%, I'll keep 90%. It has to make sense. It has to be a win-win. And I really think that these creators, the whole gig economy is people are splitting off and running these businesses and doing extremely well. This is the new world. Everyone obviously sees the Mr. Beasts of this world and that, but I think there's a lot more to be done in every segment of the market for the creator. So I really think that, working with, Paramount just announced that they're getting into short video streaming and they're going to create their own TikTok version. It was in the press yesterday, I saw. Everyone's trying to adopt into this, this new world of commerce. Netflix are obviously bringing on podcasters and thinking through like what that means. And creators are, Alan Chicken Chow just got a deal with Netflix now, which is incredible. I just think that this whole world is the big media platforms also are trying to figure out like, how do I get into this distribution?
Yeah. And actually, as you were explaining that, what I said earlier around disintermediating, when you said it, I had this aha moment where I actually think it is technically disintermediation, but it's more of a mushing. You're taking the two sides and they're coming together.
They are coming
you have the
together.
Alan Chicken Chow on the Netflix. That's mushing
right.
together. So it's all just consolidating.
It's true. And I think every big media business is trying to figure it out. Fox just announced their Fox Creative Studios, and it's very exciting what they're building. And they've got Tubi, and then you've got Netflix, and then you've got Paramount and CBS, and then you've got TikTok, obviously, which is just staying in their lane. And everyone's trying to look at TikTok and say, well, okay, we can do this screen sharing as well. A huge advantage what TikTok's done is that they built the whole e-commerce function into the app. It's very, very difficult to do. And if you don't start the app with the thought, this is a social commerce app from the get-go, it's very difficult to turn something like Instagram into that. Going forward, I think focusing on the creator, figuring out what we can do. I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing creators starting to IPO themselves, listing their own businesses. Sammi Cohen's IPOing herself because I'm building this media empire. If you take a step back, it actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, Mr. Beast. We're waiting for that one to pop, and then it'll be a mad dash. Okay, I want to ask you something that you asked me on your show, and I think in light of everything that we're talking about the future of entertainment, creator economy, what is your crazy 5-year dream or goal with what you're building?
I would love to have built a whole range of consumer products with a creator in the CPG space, whether it's beauty, food, nutrition. I think that's a personal goal. I haven't done it yet. And that's something that kind of irks me that I haven't done it. I've obviously done it with Skin Laundry when I was in China to start a brand, and it didn't work. And I think there was a number of reasons, and I don't think I really gave it the right tender loving care to do it properly. That's a personal goal that I really want to prove that I can do it. So that's out there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ooh, I'm excited.
Yeah.
I'm sure you'll be able to make this work. One hot take question, and I don't know if you've ever been asked this because this is always asked to women. And given that you are in the beauty space, very much so. What's like a self-care beauty tip that you have?
It's so funny. Like the only thing I ever use is moisturizer, and I rotate through whatever's on the counter. My boys always laugh about this. I always get a package of products almost every other day from a brand to try. And they're like, Dad, is something going on you're not telling us about? I have to say that I just use moisturizer, and simplicity is everything. But I'm always impressed with how many products that people use these days. But yeah, I'm very boring, unfortunately.
The benefits of being a man, whereas women have a 12-step skincare program that, according to the Sephora tweens, starts when you're 12 years old.
Yeah.
So, okay, now we're getting to the questions I ask every guest. Yep. Can you share a system that you have in place that benefits your career or business? And it can be a system truly for anything.
The system I have, which I've been doing for probably the last 10 years, is I get up very, very early in the morning, probably to my wife's detriment. I wake up close to 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. I go downstairs. I make myself a coffee. I'm a coffee drinker. I usually drink about two or three cups of coffee a day. That means 4. I journal every morning. 3 priorities that I'm doing during the day that I'd like to accomplish, 3. I just feel like anything more than that is just unreasonable. My life goals as well. Like, I dream about living by the water, something that just kind of gets you into that place, that gets you excited about what you're doing. And that really helps me a lot because I like to start earlier and like to finish it earlier. Mm-hmm. So it gives me time to do stuff with the family. That's my little life hack.
Ooh, I love that. Okay. So my next question comes from the social currency corner, where I get your input on a trend or business story that's impacting culture. So we've already spoken to this to some degree around the TikToker with the largest following in the world, Copy LeMay, who just minted this deal with a Chinese company for $975 million. Given that you've seen this deal come through, was there anything that you actually found surprising about the deal?
Well, first thing, I did see it and I was kind of eye-popping because Copy LeMay, as most people know, he doesn't speak, he mimes, and I was like, how's he going to live stream?
I know.
That was my first question. And then, so I looked up the stock as well, and the stock was trading at like 400 million or 500 million. I was like, well, how does he get 50% of 975 million? The math doesn't work.
Yeah.
If you look at the financials, I just looked on Yahoo and there wasn't much there. It's one of these, what is it or isn't it? What does Rich Sparkle do? That's the name of the company. But I think what's the most important thing is like, why did they do this, and what does this signal for the rest of the market? Besides that number, the thought process of buying an audience, or in this case, renting an audience for a period of time. If you could rent a shopping mall on, Madison Avenue or Century City, what's that worth to you, to have all these people that are walking through your shops every single day? And that's really what the creator economy is, and what a creator is they have this, very devout audience that are coming to your restaurant every day. And what do you want to sell them? Well, that's how we advertise, and that's how we sell product. So I think that was the most important thing that I think everyone should take away from that and put it back into their world. How does that apply? So if you're a real estate company or a private equity company, do you have creators on your cap table? Do you have creators talking about your company naturally? If you don't, why not?
I love that. I think those are really great points. Okay, so let's end with a listener question.
Okay.
And this one comes from Jennifer. As a small brand, how do we know if we're ready for TikTok Shop? I'm sure you'll have a lot of good takes on this. Mm-hmm. What signals should we look for before jumping in?
If you're a small brand, focus on one SKU. Don't focus on 10 SKUs. Don't focus on 20 SKUs. Focus on one SKU. You know what your hero SKU is. Scrap everything else. Just focus on that one SKU. Make sure that you have a margin that you can pay 30 or 40%, and focus on developing that SKU to being a hero SKU. The trend, I think, in beauty, which is, I guess is a hot take, is that it's going to be SKU driven and not brand driven on the forward base. So just, if anyone goes to Korea, you would see if you walk into an Olive & Young store, it's driven by ingredients, by SKU, course correction or things like that. And those SKUs, most brands, only 10% of the SKUs make 90% of the revenue. Think about that at TikTok, because that's how you really, really do well.
I love that take. That's great. That's great. Okay. Well, Julian, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you, Sammi.
This has been such a great conversation. You're obviously a good friend of mine, and I think I'm excited for my audience to listen and hear just not only about what you've built, but I think the tremendous opportunity. And even if you're not necessarily on the brand side, but you want to get into the TikTok Shop of it all, there is so much happening in this space. And
so much.
Like, now's the time.
Today's the day. And, what we want to be is like in 5 years from now, look back and saying, we did the right thing about getting into TikTok, getting into these new markets, focusing on one SKU and blowing up. Yeah, it's an exciting time. Thanks, Sammi. I really appreciate it. It's been fun.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Social Currency. Before you go, take a second to subscribe to the show wherever you're listening so you never miss an episode. And if you liked what you heard today, please rate and review the podcast. It massively helps the work I do to bring this show to life. And if you have a friend who is as obsessed with business and culture as you are, send this episode to them, because sharing the show is one of the best ways to support it. And if you want to keep up with the hottest business lore in real time, follow me on Instagram at Sammi Cohen Talks, and subscribe to my newsletter, Social Currency, linked in the show notes. Social Currency is a production of Social Currency Media and Money News Network. The podcast is hosted and executive produced by me, Sammi Cohen, and produced by the Money News Network team. See you next time.